I'm Amanda Tennant with amandascorner.com, and thank you for joining me today. So in this video, I'm on the Pilates Reformer, and I'm going to be demonstrating the frog series. So I'll be showing you frogs, which I also call low frogs, as well as high frogs, which is a much more advanced variation, draws in a lot more core work, a lot more hamstrings, and a lot more buns. I'm also going to show you an exercise called frog kicks, and we'll be doing that in two different directions. So the high frogs that I'll be showing you is definitely a way to advance this series, but you can also make this series more or less difficult with your spring resistance. So if we have heavier resistance, if we have more springs or heavier springs attached to the reformer, then this whole series becomes a bit more leg work and less core work. So depending upon your goals, even if we are just working with the initial exercise I'll show you, the low frog, which is kind of a basic exercise, you can make that tougher by lightening the springs. It means that your client or you will have to work harder to stabilize your pelvis in a neutral position. So when I have a new client, just introducing them to this series, I typically start them on one medium spring and one light spring. I'll put them on 2 springs unless they have some kind of knee or lower limb pathology, injury, something going on where that much weight would be contraindicated or painful for them. I typically start them a little bit heavier. And as I see that they're building the confidence and the strength to keep their pelvis really still and they're getting that core work, then I go ahead and move them to just one heavy spring, and then I go to one medium spring, and sometimes we'll play with a light spring as well. So please keep that in mind. I'm not going to be changing my springs through this demonstration, but you can certainly play with that, and it really changes the way each exercise feels. Okay, we're going to start laying down. We're going to be using our loops on our feet. So if it's okay for you or your client to roll through the spine, I like to have people come down onto the reformer by scooting their seat really close to the feet so that you're on the edge of the reformer. Squeeze the legs together if you can. Sit nice and tall, arms out in front, and then begin to roll down through the spine. If their stomach is not strong enough to support them, the hands can come behind the legs. You want to keep the shoulders drawn down. Most people don't fit when they first come down, so just let them adjust. From here, we're going to press out, grab our loops, and step our feet up into the loops. I'm not real particular with how my clients bring their loops onto their feet, but I do like for them to be even and as comfortable as possible. So immediately when you have a new person come into this is a very foreign, strange feeling to have your feet in these loops and to be kind of coming into an inverted position. We probably haven't spent a lot of time on equipment that brings them into this posture. So they're going to discover right away that the loops are pulling their body and bringing their pelvis into a posterior pelvic tilt. It's going to smash and imprint the low spine into the mat, and we do not want that through the frog series. So you have to guide your patient. I usually bring my hand out in front of the feet and tell your patient or your client to push towards your hand until they've got that neutral spine and they can bring some space underneath the low back. So I have the tailbone anchored down, my pubic bone is heading down into the cushion, and I have freedom underneath the low back. So I also guide most people start like this. They start with really wide, kind of floppy knees. We want to draw in the inner thighs. So I have clients keep the knees at the width of the shoulders or slightly more narrow. So we're always staying within the frame of the body, and that's our Pilates box. So we're staying really contained and controlled. And as we do that, not only do we bring a little bit of magnetism between the thighs, we bring that inner thigh line, we can pull up through the pelvic floor and draw the belly down and in, and we just get this whole beautiful line of work happening up the center seam of the body, and that really helps to deepen the work of the core and to find your core. From here, on an exhale, we press up and out on a diagonal. As I press higher to the ceiling, this becomes easier on my belly. As I press lower to the floor, the lower your diagonal, you get a little bit more belly work. We want to keep that space underneath the low back through this entire range, but we want this controlled. I don't want to see somebody flop into an anterior pelvic tilt where they have a lot of lumbar lordosis, where they sway back, where their belly pops. We don't want to see a loaf of bread here or a visible pop through the belly. So really nice and tight and controlled, and on an inhale, zipping up the belly, they bend the knees in line with the shoulders or slightly more narrow. And again, the challenge is that the machine is going to try to keep pulling you. Its job is to keep pulling you. That's why the reformer is so wonderful for stretching. However, your job with your belly is to stop the machine from pulling you until where you flatten your back. You want to stay neutral. So on an exhale, we press up and out. I zip the thighs together, the pelvic floor and the belly, and on an inhale, I draw down and in. So if I can just get somebody kind of comfortable with this, a lot of times a new client, their legs are going to be shaking and bouncing around. The neurological system is just sort of getting used to this. They're figuring out how to balance the amount of pressure that they use from each side of the body. So I just kind of want them to work on symmetry, work on the knees, and really work on this pelvis. Once that becomes a bit more comfortable and easy for them, then I start having them pay attention to their feet. So most people, when they come into this position, their big toes, and I'm exaggerating it, some people might look like this, but their big toes are going to be closer to their face than their pinkies. And so as we draw those knees in, I also want them to try to get all 10 toes flush in the same plane and space. And that's really tricky for a lot of people. So you work differently up the leg when you do that. You're going to drop again more through the center of the leg. So instead of letting those pinkies flop away and the big toes get close, I let everything line up and I press up and out from that posture, and I maintain that, and again that draws up into the center seam of my body a little bit more. So it's a subtle change, but it does make a big difference in the way this feels. Of course, as you're going through this series, you want the upper body to be really soft and relaxed here, good alignment through the neck. Okay, let's talk about high frogs. So once somebody gets very comfortable with that, we can take that same frog exercise and lift it up into a shoulder stand. So I tend to have people start down. I call this their beginning low frog position. We start a lot of exercises from this posture and the neutral. I let them platform their arms down. They will roll through a flat back and let the hips and bum come up into the air. So number one, for safety, the headrest must be down flat before you come up. I should have said that before I even came up. So your headrest is flat here, and there is no weight on my neck. I can turn my head. It's very free. I've got the weight on the upper back here. It's backed by my shoulder blades, by my scapula. Again, I'm going to let the knees draw in narrow, so I'm in this tight little ball shape. I still have a small V in my feet with the heels together, and my toes are all lined up. So the more I exhale and straighten my legs overhead, the easier this becomes. As I inhale down and in, if I exhale a little bit more vertical, I get quite a bit more belly work and leg work and bum work here. So the whole goal is to stay lifted and stay really steady through here. So that is the core work. We don't want to be dropping back down. We don't want everything shaking around. And again, as you press out more and more, then this becomes more core work. So you want to take care that the jaws aren't squeezing here and the neck isn't getting all nice and tight. So inhaling down and in, drawing the belly into the spine, exhale up and out. As we finish out of this series, I usually have people do anywhere from 6 to 10 repetitions if they can. Once they come down, I want them to stay curled like a little ball and roll through the spine. So nice and slow, they take their time and they drop down one vertebra at a time. I have them imagine they're giving themselves a little bit of a back massage, letting each bone have its turn. We come all the way back into our low frog, meaning my tailbone is down, I've got my neutral, and I'm going to show you frog kicks. These are kind of fun. They take a little bit of coordination. You exhale up and out just like a regular frog. From here, you straddle the legs open. And then from your hip crease down to your knee, you try to keep your thighs really still, imagining that they're in cement, and you bend the knees and draw the heels back down together. So when I did this just now, my knees are wider than my shoulders, and that's okay. We just go from there. We exhale and press up and out. We open with a straddle, and then we bend. And so it's really tricky trying to keep the thighs perfectly still in space. You have to co-contract all the muscles around your thigh in order to do that. Okay, so from there we can reverse that. We can come back down and in like a low frog. Again, I want to keep my thighs really still and just hinge open. And then I squeeze back together with long legs. So lots of inner thigh work, keeping the tummy tight, pelvis really still. So I come down and in, I open into a straddle and squeeze on the diagonal. Last time, draw down and in, split apart, squeeze back together, and then we'll come down and in to remove our loops. We can grab them with the hands and pop them off, and then carefully lower down and in. Good, and so you can either roll to the side to come up, or again, from a more belly work, you can bring hands behind the thighs or let the arms come up and roll back up to a seated position so that your transition in and out of the frog series becomes a little bit of work in itself. It's an exercise all in itself. So that is how I like to do the frog series. I give this series to just about everybody, as long as it's a healthy exercise for them. And low frogs is something that I start my new clients, I start them with that early on. It's a great one just to kind of get used to having your feet in the loops. Again, it's a little bit of a strange feeling for most people. They have not participated, likely they have not participated in other exercises where they have their feet in the loops like that, with that kind of resistance, working the legs independently. And then when we have our feet in the loops, we start to come into some different inverted postures, and that can be kind of confusing for people. So I think that the frog series is a really nice place to start that. I also think it's an excellent series for starting to show somebody, really, so that they can feel and see how you may be working your legs almost independently. The body's not really broken up like that, but that you're working on your legs. You might think you're just working your legs, but really that's all coming from your powerhouse. You've got to keep that pelvis still and stable. So they begin to see what looks like just a leg exercise is actually a belly exercise as well. So I think it's a great place to start to train somebody so that they can begin doing all of their Pilates like that, because that's how it should be done. If you have any questions, or if you've got some other little frog exercises or variations that you like to play with, then you can feel free to email me at Amanda's Corner. It's CORENER @ charter.net. Thank you. I hope to see you again soon. Bye.